there, Helen. So I just had the pleasure of reading through your draft and thought I would take a few minutes to walk you through my comments and kind of give you a sense of where your essay is already on track and working, and then maybe some advice for thinking about how you can clarify it in some places, maybe tease out some of the ideas and really take your essay 3 to the next level. So you'll see that on the draft itself, there's these little sticky notes. So after this video, you can always read back through these if you want to see some of my written comments. But that's mostly what I'll be talking about in here. So first of all, thank you for getting a draft. I think it's so important. Students who turn in a substantial draft like you have actually give me and Eric some substantial content to look at and comment on so that we can give you feedback that will really help you keep bringing your essay forward. And so thanks for taking the time to do that. I think it makes the revising process really worthwhile and puts you in a much better position to be successful on the final version that you will send in. So here we are, we're looking at your introduction. I think it's a pretty strong intro overall. It's engaging. I love the use of your voice throughout this whole essay. It feels very casual and friendly, even while you're pulling in these sophisticated ideas. And so I think it works really well. You have your clear position or thesis that going into the nursing program is the way to go. And you're establishing that nice trust and connection with Jake up front. So I think your intro is already working well. And then you decide to move into Socrates as your first source. This paragraph here is really solid, shows a lot of great promise, really demonstrates your understanding of Socrates. I have a few small sentence level suggestions, like just rewording things a little bit so you can look at these sticky notes in here. This suggestion is, I'm advising you to tease out the idea of willpower a little bit more, because the way that you just define it here, you say willpower is what drives you to do what it is you're going to do. That sounds exactly like what appetites are. So willpower goes further than that. It's more than that. And so I'm asking you maybe to think about here, how does willpower function? When do we need it? How does it step in? How does it serve us? And so maybe you could even just look at definitions of willpower, but if you could just get a little further with your definition of willpower there, I think that would be really helpful. And then finally, this is just a small thing. You say at the end here, the reason I'm describing Socrates and his belief is because you are having a hard time using your spirit or willpower and your pleasure to make this decision. I think you want the word reason here instead of pleasure. And you talk a little bit more about pleasure and appetites down here, which we'll address in a minute. But based on what Socrates says about flourishing, I think the more accurate word here would be reason. But otherwise, this paragraph is just really great and really gives Jake, I think, some underlying foundation for what Socrates' theory is all about in terms of happiness and balancing our psyche. And then you develop it further, which is really great. I think this paragraph is on the way to being really solid. There were a couple places I got tripped up, though, and so I want to point those out and give you a little bit of advice. So here in this section, you are talking about your gut. And that part, I think, is what really threw me, because when we talk about our guts, that seems like we're talking about appetites. In class, we really talked about our reason being here and our willpower being like our reins, and then our appetites coming from our gut. And so when you talk about listening to your gut, I think that can be really confusing to Jake, because there's actually two types of appetites that I think you're trying to parse apart here. And so on the one hand, appetite could be seen as his desire to go to nursing school. And I think that's what you're saying here. But the more kind of weighty example is that the appetites really are those things that we want that bring us temporary pleasure. And so in Jake's situation, his gut or his appetite would also be representing all of those low quality pleasures that he's getting at the resort. So the fun, the food, the drink, the partying, the sunshine, the small chit chat with people, all of those kinds of things are those low quality pleasures, which are really appetites. And so when you say listen to your gut, it's really confusing because it could mean one of two things. It could mean go to nursing school, or it could also mean stay at your job. And so I think we need to do more work in this paragraph to make it clear to Jake what you're really saying is when you say listen to your gut, you're talking about listen to your gut desire to go to nursing school, not listen to your gut, which is going to drive you toward all of those low quality pleasures. And so I think you want to differentiate here for Jake those two different types of appetites that he's experiencing. Let's see. And I did have a note and it looks like it disappeared. So let me go back and retype it for you. Okay, so I went back in and typed my little suggestion here. So rather than having the sentence jump right into this idea of make sure you're listening to your gut, I think you need to pause here and help Jake see that his gut represents something that is not the low quality pleasures. And so here's an example of some phrasing. You could stop there and say something like, Jake, on the one hand, you say you should understand your options. So Jake, on the one hand, your gut is telling you to go to nursing school. However, your appetites are also being driven or fed by those temporary pleasures that you're experiencing at your current job. These temporary pleasures are distracting you from your gut desire to go back to school. So I think by clarifying what you mean by gut and showing that that's not the same thing as those appetites that he has at his resort job, you're going to set him up to make a lot more sense of that. Then you could go on and say something like, your gut feeling is telling you what to do without overthinking the situation. But, and again, I don't even think that once you make that change, I don't think you need this. I think this actually could be even more confusing to Jake. So making that addition and then jumping right into willpower, I think is going to make the most sense. Your willpower is the determination that your mind has to do what it takes to get or do what your gut is telling you. That is a perfect follow-up to that idea that I just presented you with. Okay, so that's a great use of that application of willpower. This is what helps you get what you want, the drive to do something. The reasoning and logical part always comes last. This is when you decide to take a step back and actually think about your decision. So I think that's all great. But here, this part that's circled in blue, I think you're getting off track here. You're talking about not overthinking things and then talking about appetites at the resort. And so this feels a little off topic here. Maybe what you need to do is just get rid of this part right here. If you don't let your gut tell you first, you'll let your reason cause you to overthink. I would get rid of that line because it is a little bit distracting, and focus instead on this idea of reasoning and logical part, right? And so really, I think where you want to go with this is, Jake, you need your reason to work together with your willpower to help you stop being so distracted by all of these easy pleasures that you're getting at the resort so that you can follow your gut and achieve your dreams. And that kind of I took from your idea earlier where you said that his fun-filled job is taking the attention away from his willpower. That's exactly it. And so just restating that here maybe a little bit, getting rid of this little piece right here, I think is going to help you clarify your analysis a lot more for Jake in there. Okay, and then we jump into Rat Park, which is a great example to use in this essay. I think you do a really nice job of summarizing the study. Just make sure that you're citing it, right? So tell us where the study came from, what was the source, so that you can link that to the works cited page. There's an activity in the quiz area where we worked on citations, so you can figure out how to cite Rat Park in there. We might have some time on Wednesday in class to review some of this as well, because I've seen a few people struggle with these citations. The term happiness here, I think, just look at my suggestion. I think happiness might be a little bit misleading. Maybe you're looking for the phrase immediate pleasure. And then let's see, in this section right here, okay, so awesome summary of Rat Park. You're really setting this up quite nicely. I'm going to suggest that you dig in at this spot where you talk about how the rats who chose Rat Park had longer lives and enjoyed Rat Park. It's actually more than that. So I really want you to push yourself here. It's not just that they lived longer. I mean, that's important, right? They lived longer. And it's not just that they were enjoying themselves. It really has to do with this idea of flourishing. So what did flourishing look like? For these rats. And so some of the things that I included was that they got to have other rat relationships. They had this mental stimulation that rats crave. They really just got to fulfill their drive to be rats, right? And so that is what you want to hammer home for Jake. Not just that nursing school would be subjectively more enjoyable, but there are objective elements to striving for high quality pleasures that are just going to cash out in a more fulfilling life. And so I think just kind of teasing that out a little bit more from Jake is going to help drive that point home. Okay. Otherwise, I think that you are doing some really nice application here. I mean, you are on the right track. It's just a matter of just hammering home that message a little bit more for Jake. When you talk about high quality pleasures, as you start to do at the end of this paragraph, make sure you tie that to Mill. So just as earlier on, you were giving Socrates credit for his ideas, when you start talking about Mill and types of pleasures, or start talking about types of pleasures, you want to make sure that you credit those ideas to Mill, because he's really the one that came up with those ideas, and you don't want to make it sound like you're coming up with those ideas. So make sure to cite that properly. In this section on Mill, just had a few other suggestions. You do a nice job of explaining that there's these two types of pleasures and that they're different from each other. One other thing you could include is just that low quality pleasures are not as easy to obtain. They require much more work, which is a high quality pleasure is one that, you don't get to experience the happiness as quickly as you would a low quality pleasure, but that there's something more there, right? And you say here that the thing that's more is that it gives lasting happiness. So I'm going to challenge you to dig in here. What is lasting happiness? What does that mean? Jake's not going to have any clue what that's all about. So this is where you want to dig in and show him why high quality pleasures are better. So you really want to hitch back into Mill here. Mill is going to talk about something like fecundity, or using our higher quality, our higher faculties, and why that's important to help us get a sense of achievement, to really help us feel like we have accomplished something. And so really revisit those ideas from Mill here. Think about that idea of fecundity. Fecundity has to do with repeatability, but it also has to do with opening doors to new experiences that could bring more fulfilling pleasures to us down the road. And so I'm just going to say, look back at Mill here, think about those ideas of higher faculties, think about the idea of what fecundity is, and how is it that high quality pleasures help us tap into those things more than low quality pleasures. Okay, just a couple more comments here, Helen. I'm going to suggest, as you jump into the why giving makes you happy paragraph, to think about creating a topical transition sentence that won't feel like you're throwing a totally new topic at your reader, but that you can kind of blend those ideas together. So maybe something like, Jake, not only is it important for you to keep your psyche in balance and to strive for high quality pleasures, but you'll also want to consider the research on why giving makes us happy and how that ties into your situation as well, or something like that, that kind of helps guide your reader into this next example, so it doesn't feel like they've just been thrown into a completely different realm, right? I think what you're trying to do in this paragraph is talk about the Brooks study, why giving makes us happier. Right now, this really feels more like just stream of consciousness of your own writing, which is okay because we're in the draft stage right now. But what I'm suggesting you do is really go back and look at the Brooks article, Why Giving Makes You Happy, and think about actually summarizing that important finding from that one, and then really being mindful about how you're going to link that source to Jake's specific situation. So the question I ask here is, what does giving have to do with Jake going to nursing school? And so what is the connection there? Why bring this source in at all? What does it have to do with Jake's situation? So right now, yes, you are vaguely referencing a source that was used in the class, but not really tying it to your paper or tying it to Jake. So I think if you want to use the sample, just push yourself to go a little bit further with it, see those connections, and really draw those connections out. So that is my advice there. I think at the very end, my last piece of advice is just that you're sort of pulling back from your thesis here and suggesting that the choice is up to Jake. I would say go in the opposite direction. Jake has asked you for advice, so tell him that, nursing school is the way to go. He knows that he can make his own choice here, but what you want to do is really drive home the thesis that you started the paper with, because really that's what all of your evidence is pointing to. So I hope you find that helpful, Helen. Again, thank you for writing this very promising first draft. If you have any questions about the suggestions I've made, feel free to email me. I'm super excited to see what you do with your revision and to get to read your final version of this essay. So thanks so much, Helen.